The quiet streets of Layla's suburban neighborhood, usually filled with the sounds of children playing and the hum of everyday life, were about to witness something far from ordinary. Layla, an 8-year-old black girl with a heart full of kindness, was riding her bike when she noticed something strange. An elderly white woman, Mrs. Harper, trapped beneath a car after a sudden accident. What would have terrified most only ignited a sense of duty in young Layla. But how could a child step in where adults hadn't yet noticed the danger? And in a world where help doesn't always come from the expected places, how did Layla manage to become the hero of the day? Let's find out. But before we dive into this incredible story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if this moment of bravery touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will leave you speechless. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over Maple Street. It was a typical Saturday afternoon in the modest suburban neighborhood, where the sounds of children playing and lawnmowers humming filled the air. Among the cheerful chaos, a bright yellow bicycle weaved its way down the sidewalk, its rider giggling with delight. Layla Johnson, an energetic 8-year-old girl with dark curly hair tied back in colorful beads, pedaled faster as she approached her favorite part of the street. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she zoomed past the rows of nearly identical houses, each with its own unique touch of character. "Whoosh!" Layla exclaimed, pretending she was flying through the air. She loved the feel of the wind on her face and the freedom that came with exploring her neighborhood. As she rounded the corner, Layla waved enthusiastically at Mr. Rodriguez, who was tending to his prized rose bushes. "Hi, Mr. Rodriguez," she called out. The older man looked up from his gardening and smiled warmly. "Hola, Layla. Be careful now, don't go too fast." Layla nodded, slowing down just a bit as she passed. She was a favorite among her neighbors, known for her infectious smile and kind heart. Even at her young age, Layla had a way of brightening everyone's day with her presence. As she continued her ride, Layla's eyes were drawn to a house across the street. Unlike the other homes with their neatly trimmed lawns and cheerful decorations, this one stood out for its quietness. The paint was a faded gray, and the curtains were always drawn. On the small front porch sat an elderly woman in a rocking chair, her silver hair neatly pinned back and her hands folded in her lap. This was Mrs. Harper's house. Layla had lived on Maple Street her whole life, but she couldn't remember a time when Mrs. Harper wasn't sitting on that porch, watching the world go by without really being a part of it. Curiosity got the better of Layla, and she slowed her bike to a stop. Taking a deep breath, she raised her hand and waved enthusiastically. "Hi, Mrs. Harper," she called out, her voice clear and hopeful. For a moment, nothing happened. Mrs. Harper remained still, almost as if she hadn't heard the greeting. But then, ever so slightly, the corners of her mouth turned upward in a faint smile. She didn't wave back or say anything, but that tiny acknowledgement made Layla's heart soar. As quickly as it had appeared, the smile faded, and Mrs. Harper's gaze drifted back to the street, her expression once again unreadable. Layla's own smile dimmed a little, but she didn't let it discourage her. There was something mysterious about the old woman that made Layla want to know more. "Did you see that?" Layla whispered to herself, her eyes wide with excitement. "She smiled at me." With a renewed sense of purpose, Layla pedaled home, her mind buzzing with questions about the enigmatic Mrs. Harper. The Johnson household was a modest 2-bedroom home, its walls adorned with family photos and Layla's colorful artwork. As Layla pushed open the front door, the aroma of her mother's famous spaghetti sauce filled the air. "Mama, I'm home," Layla called out, kicking off her shoes and racing to the kitchen. Tanya Johnson stood at the stove, stirring a large pot of sauce. She turned to greet her daughter, her warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled. Despite the long hours she worked as a nurse at the local hospital, Tanya always made sure to have home-cooked meals ready for Layla. "Hey, baby girl," Tanya said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Did you have fun riding your bike?" Layla nodded enthusiastically, her beads clicking together. "Ah, and guess what, Mama? Mrs. Harper smiled at me today." Tanya's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Did she now? That's wonderful, Layla. Mrs. Harper doesn't smile much these days." "Why is that, Mama?" Layla asked, climbing onto a kitchen stool. Why does she always look so sad? Tanya sighed, turning down the heat on the stove before joining her daughter at the counter. Well, sweetie, sometimes people go through hard times that make them want to keep to themselves. Mrs. Harper lost her husband a few years ago, and I think she's still hurting from that. Layla's brow furrowed as she tried to understand. But doesn't she get lonely? Doesn't she want friends? I'm sure she does, baby, Tanya replied, reaching out to smooth a stray curl from Layla's forehead. But it's not always easy for people to reach out when they're hurting. That's why it's so important to be kind to everyone, even if they don't seem to want it at first. Layla nodded solemnly, taking in her mother's words. Is that why you always tell me to help others, Mama? Even when it's hard? Tanya smiled proudly at her daughter's perceptiveness. That's exactly right, Layla. You never know how much a small act of kindness can mean to someone who's struggling. It might just change their whole day, or even their life. As Tanya stood to check on the sauce, Layla's mind wandered back to Mrs. Harper's faint smile. She wondered what it would take to make the old woman truly happy, to see her eyes light up with joy. Mama, Layla said suddenly, do you think Mrs. Harper likes cookies? Maybe we could bake some for her? Tanya turned back to her daughter, her heart swelling with pride. That's a wonderful idea, Layla. We can bake some tomorrow after church. For now, though, it's time to set the table for dinner. As Layla hopped down from the stool to help her mother, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. She didn't know what it was, but the thought of bringing a smile to Mrs. Harper's face filled her with excitement and purpose. Next day, as they walked across the street, plate of cookies in hand, Layla felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Mrs. Harper was in her usual spot on the porch, her gaze fixed on some distant point. Taking a deep breath, Layla led the way up the path to Mrs. Harper's house. As they approached, the old woman's eyes slowly turned to regard them, her expression unreadable. Good afternoon, Mrs. Harper, Tanya called out warmly. Layla and I baked some cookies today, and we thought you might like some. For a moment, there was silence. Layla held her breath, wondering if Mrs. Harper would respond. Then, almost imperceptibly, the old woman nodded. Encouraged, Layla took a step forward, holding out the plate. We made chocolate chip, she said, her voice smaller than usual but still clear. They're still warm. Mrs. Harper's gaze shifted to Layla, and for a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes, a mix of surprise and something softer, almost like gratitude. Slowly, she reached out and took the plate, her weathered hands trembling slightly. Thank you, Mrs. Harper said, her voice rough from disuse but not unkind. That's very thoughtful of you. Layla's face lit up with a brilliant smile. You're welcome, Mrs. Harper. I hope you like them. As they turned to leave, Layla glanced back over her shoulder. To her amazement, she saw Mrs. Harper pick up a cookie and take a small bite. The old woman's eyes closed for a moment, and the ghost of a smile played at the corners of her mouth. Walking home, Layla felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. She had done something kind, something brave, and even though Mrs. Harper hadn't said much, Layla knew it had mattered. You did good, baby girl, Tanya said softly, squeezing Layla's hand. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is to keep being kind, even when we don't know how it'll be received. Layla nodded, her mind already whirling with ideas for other ways she could brighten Mrs. Harper's day. As they reached their own front porch, Layla paused, looking back across the street. Mrs. Harper was still there, slowly eating a cookie, her posture somehow less rigid than before. The lazy afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across Maple Street. The rhythmic sound of sprinklers and the distant laughter of children playing filled the air. It was a day like any other in the quiet suburban neighborhood, but an unexpected turn of events was about to shatter the peaceful routine. Mrs. Harper stood in her living room, keys clutched tightly in her wrinkled hand. She stared out the window at her old Buick, parked in the driveway. It had been weeks since she'd last driven it, preferring the safety and predictability of her front porch. But today was different. She'd run out of her heart medication, and the pharmacy didn't deliver on weekends. It's just a short drive, she murmured to herself, trying to quell the anxiety bubbling up in her chest. You can do this, Margaret. With a deep breath, Mrs. Harper stepped out of her house. The sudden brightness made her squint, and she paused for a moment to let her eyes adjust. As she made her way down the porch steps, her neighbor, Mr. Thompson, waved from across the street. "Afternoon, Margaret," he called out. "Nice day for a drive, isn't it?" Mrs. Harper managed a small nod and a tight smile. "Just running a quick errand," she replied, her voice barely carrying across the street. As she approached her car, Mrs. Harper felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She gripped the door handle tightly, waiting for the sensation to pass. "It's nothing," she told herself. "Just nerves." Sliding into the driver's seat, Mrs. Harper took a moment to familiarize herself with the controls. It had been so long since she'd driven that everything felt foreign. She inserted the key with a shaky hand and turned the ignition. The engine sputtered to life, filling the quiet street with its low rumble. Mrs. Harper gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white with tension. Slowly, she shifted the car into reverse and began to back out of the driveway. That's when things went terribly wrong. Another wave of dizziness hit her, stronger this time. The world seemed to tilt and spin. Mrs. Harper's foot slipped, pressing hard on the accelerator instead of the brake. The car lurched backward, far too quickly. There was a sickening crunch as the Buick slammed into the large oak tree at the edge of Mrs. Harper's property. The impact sent a shudder through the entire vehicle. Mrs. Harper's head snapped back, then forward, her seatbelt cutting into her chest. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, with a groan of metal, the car began to tip. Mrs. Harper's eyes widened in horror as she felt herself falling. The world turned upside down, and suddenly she was trapped, pinned beneath the weight of her own vehicle. Pain shot through her leg, and she could taste blood in her mouth. Panic rose in her throat as she realized her predicament. She was stuck, hidden from view, with no way to call for help. "Help!" she croaked, her voice weak and muffled by the twisted metal surrounding her. "Someone please help me." But her cries went unheard. The crash had been loud, yes, but not spectacularly so. From the outside, it looked like a simple fender bender. A few neighbors peered out their windows or stepped onto their porches, curious about the noise. "Looks like old Mrs. Harper had a bit of trouble with her car," Mr. Thompson remarked to his wife, shaking his head. "I told her she shouldn't be driving at her age. Should we go check on her?" Mrs. Thompson asked, a note of concern in her voice. Mr. Thompson waved dismissively. "I'm sure she's fine. Probably just embarrassed. Let's give her a minute to collect herself." And so, as Mrs. Harper lay trapped and in pain, the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual Saturday afternoon activities. The sound of lawnmowers and children playing once again filled the air, drowning out her feeble calls for help. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours to Mrs. Harper. The pain in her leg was getting worse, and she could feel a warm trickle of blood running down her face. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears of fear and frustration. How long would she be stuck here? Would anyone find her before it was too late? Just when Mrs. Harper was about to give up hope, she heard a sound that made her heart leap, the cheerful ring of a bicycle bell. Layla pedaled down the street, her pigtails flying behind her. She was lost in her own world, imagining she was on a grand adventure through an enchanted forest. As she approached Mrs. Harper's house, something caught her eye. Layla slowed her bike, frowning at the sight of Mrs. Harper's car. It was sitting at an odd angle, half on the lawn and half on the driveway. The back end was crumpled against the big oak tree. "That's weird," Layla muttered to herself. She remembered seeing Mrs. Harper get into her car earlier. Where was she now? Unlike the adults who had dismissed the accident as minor, Layla's curiosity got the better of her. She pedaled closer, her eyes scanning the scene. That's when she heard it, a faint cry coming from beneath the car. Layla's eyes widened in shock as she realized what she was seeing. There, barely visible beneath the twisted metal, was Mrs. Harper. "Mrs. Harper!" Layla cried out, dropping her bike and rushing towards the car. "Mrs. Harper, can you hear me?" Mrs. Harper's eyes fluttered open at the sound of Layla's voice. "Help," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please help me." Layla's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to stay calm. She remembered what her mom had taught her about emergencies: stay calm and get help. "It's okay, Mrs. Harper," Layla said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm here. I'm going to get help. Just hold on, okay? Mrs. Harper managed a weak nod, relief flooding through her at the sight of the young girl. Layla might be small, but right now, she was Mrs. Harper's biggest hope. Layla knew she needed to act fast. She looked around frantically, trying to decide what to do. Then she remembered Mr. Lee, the retired mechanic, lived just a few houses down. If anyone could help, it would be him. I'll be right back, Mrs. Harper, Layla promised. I'm going to get Mr. Lee. He'll know what to do. With that, Layla took off running as fast as her legs could carry her. She sprinted down the sidewalk, her lungs burning with the effort. When she reached Mr. Lee's house, she pounded on the door with all her might. Mr. Lee! Mr. Lee, she shouted. Please come quick. It's an emergency. After what felt like an eternity, the door swung open. Mr. Lee, a kind-faced man in his 60s, looked down at Layla with concern. Layla? What's wrong, child? Why all the shouting? He asked, his brow furrowed. Layla was panting, struggling to catch her breath. It's Mrs. Harper, she gasped. There's been an accident. Her car. She's trapped underneath. We have to help her. Mr. Lee's eyes widened in surprise. Trapped under her car? Are you sure, Layla? That sounds very serious. Layla nodded vigorously. I'm sure, Mr. Lee. I saw her myself. She's hurt and scared. Please, we have to hurry. For a moment, Mr. Lee hesitated. It was hard to believe that such a serious accident could have happened without anyone noticing. Was it possible that Layla was exaggerating? But as he looked into Layla's earnest, frightened eyes, he knew she wasn't making this up. Something in her urgency convinced him that this was real. All right, Layla, he said, lead the way. Relief washed over Layla as they started running towards Mrs. Harper's house. Layla filled him in on everything she had seen. The air was thick with tension, and the usual weekend sounds of lawnmowers and children playing had been replaced by an eerie silence. As they approached Mrs. Harper's overturned car, Mr. Lee's face grew grim. He had seen his fair share of accidents during his years as a mechanic, but this was different. This was personal. Stay back, Layla, he warned, his voice low and serious. I need to check how bad it is. But Layla, driven by a mix of concern and determination, wasn't about to be left behind. She watched intently as Mr. Lee knelt down to peer under the car. Mrs. Harper, he called out, his voice steady despite the worry etched on his face. Can you hear me? A weak groan came from beneath the twisted metal. Help, please. Mrs. Harper's voice was barely audible, laced with pain and fear. Mr. Lee turned to Layla, his expression grave. It's worse than I thought. We need more help. Without hesitation, he stood up and called out to the neighbors who had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion. Hey, we need help over here. Mrs. Harper is trapped under her car. The reaction was immediate. Doors flew open, and people rushed out of their houses, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. Mr. Thompson, who had earlier dismissed the accident, was the first to reach them, his face pale with shock and guilt. Oh, God, he muttered. I had no idea. What can we do? Mr. Lee took charge, his years of experience kicking in. We need to stabilize the car before we try to move it. Johnson, grab some wooden blocks from your garage. Peters, we'll need your floor jack. And someone call 911 now. As the neighbors scrambled to follow Mr. Lee's instructions, Layla stood rooted to the spot, her eyes fixed on the car where Mrs. Harper was trapped. She could hear the old woman's labored breathing and occasional whimpers of pain. Without thinking, Layla dropped to her knees and crawled closer to the car. Mrs. Harper, she called softly. We're going to get you out, okay? Just hold on. There was a moment of silence. Then Mrs. Harper's shaky voice replied, Layla? Oh, thank goodness. I'm scared, dear. Layla felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. Now wasn't the time to be scared. Mrs. Harper needed her to be brave. It's okay to be scared, Layla said, trying to keep her voice calm like her mom did when she was upset. But you're not alone. We're all here to help you. Can you tell me where it hurts? As Mrs. Harper described her pain, Layla relayed the information to Mr. Lee, who had returned with the necessary equipment. He nodded approvingly at Layla's initiative. Good job, kiddo, he said. Keep talking to her. It'll help keep her calm and conscious. While Mr. Lee coordinated with the other adults to stabilize the car, Layla focused on Mrs. Harper. She talked about everything and nothing: school, her favorite books, the cookies she had baked. Anything to keep Mrs. Harper's mind off the pain and fear. "Remember when we made those chocolate chip cookies, Mrs. Harper?" Layla asked, her voice bright despite the circumstances. "Maybe when you're feeling better, we can bake some together. I found a recipe for oatmeal raisin that looks really good." Mrs. Harper's reply was weak, but touched with warmth. I'd like that, dear. Very much." As the minutes ticked by, more neighbors arrived to help. Mr. Lee had managed to get the car stabilized, but they were still waiting for the proper equipment to lift it safely. Suddenly, Layla had an idea. She tugged on Mr. Lee's sleeve, her eyes wide with urgency. "Mr. Lee," she said, "what if we all lifted the car together? Just a little bit, to take some pressure off Mrs. Harper's leg?" Mr. Lee looked at her in surprise, then glanced at the gathered neighbors. It was risky, but it might just work. "You know what, Layla? That's not a bad idea at all." He turned to the crowd, raising his voice to be heard. "All right, everyone, we're going to try something. We need as many strong arms as we can get. We're going to lift the car just enough to relieve some pressure on Mrs. Harper. On my count, ready?" The neighbors looked at each other uncertainly, but one by one, they stepped forward. Men and women, young and old, they all took their positions around the car. Layla watched in awe as the community came together. She saw Mr. Thompson, who had ignored the accident earlier, now straining with effort. Mrs. Rodriguez, who barely spoke English, stood shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Patel from the end of the street. In that moment, all the invisible barriers that usually divided them seemed to melt away. "Ready," Mr. Lee called out. "1, 2, 3, lift!" With a collective grunt of effort, the neighbors heaved. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the car began to shift. "That's it," Mr. Lee encouraged. "Just a little more?" Layla held her breath, her heart pounding. She could see the strain on everyone's faces, the determination in their eyes. And then she heard it, a sigh of relief from beneath the car. "The pressure, it's less," Mrs. Harper called out, her voice stronger than before. "Oh, thank you. Thank you all." A cheer went up from the neighbors, their faces shining with sweat and triumph. They had done it. Together, they had made a difference. As they carefully lowered the car back down, making sure it was stable, Layla felt a surge of pride. It had been her idea, and it had worked. She had helped Mrs. Harper, just like she'd wanted to since the day she'd waved at her from across the street. The sound of sirens in the distance brought a new wave of relief. Help was coming. Professional help. "They're almost here, Mrs. Harper," Layla called out, her voice filled with excitement. "The ambulance is coming. You're going to be okay." As the sirens grew louder, Mr. Lee turned to Layla with a smile. "You did good, kid," he said, ruffling her hair. "Real good. You should be proud of yourself." Layla beamed at the praise, but her smile faltered as she looked back at the car. "I just want Mrs. Harper to be okay," she said softly. Mr. Lee nodded, his expression serious but kind. "I know. And thanks to you, she has a much better chance now." The screech of tires announced the arrival of the ambulance and fire truck. Paramedics and firefighters poured out, quickly assessing the scene. One of the paramedics, a kind-faced woman, knelt down next to Layla. "Hi there," she said gently. "I hear you're the hero of the hour. Can you tell me what happened?" As Layla recounted the events, the paramedic listened intently, her eyebrows rising in surprise and admiration. "Well," she said when Layla had finished, "I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. You did everything right, sweetheart. Absolutely everything." The firefighters, meanwhile, had brought out their heavy-duty equipment. With practiced efficiency, they began the delicate process of lifting the car and extracting Mrs. Harper. Layla watched, her heart in her throat, as Mrs. Harper was finally brought out from under the car. The old woman looked pale and disheveled, her clothes torn and dirty, but she was alive. As they loaded her onto a stretcher, her eyes found Layla in the crowd. "Layla," she called out weakly, reaching out a shaky hand. "Layla, dear, come here." Layla rushed forward, taking Mrs. Harper's hand in both of hers. "I'm here, Mrs. Harper," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're going to be okay now." Mrs. Harper's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the little girl who had saved her life. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're my guardian angel, Layla. I'll never forget this." As the paramedics prepared to load Mrs. Harper into the ambulance, Layla felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see her mother, who must have heard about the accident and come running. "Oh, Layla," Tanya said, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, baby girl. So proud." Layla hugged her mother back, suddenly feeling the weight of everything that had happened. She was tired and a little scared, but mostly, she felt a warm glow of satisfaction. She had made a difference today. She had been brave in the face of uncertainty, just like her mother had taught her. As they watched the ambulance pull away, its sirens wailing, Mr. Lee approached them. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his voice filled with respect, "you've raised one remarkable daughter. She saved a life today." Tanya nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "She sure did," she agreed. "Though I have a feeling this isn't the end of the story. Is it, Layla?" Layla looked up at her mother, then back at Mrs. Harper's house. She thought about the lonely old woman who had been trapped and afraid, and how grateful she had looked when Layla spoke to her. No, this wasn't the end of the story. In many ways, it felt like just the beginning. "No, Mama," Layla said softly. "I think it's just the start." Mr. Thompson approached Layla, his face etched with remorse. "I owe you an apology, young lady," he said. "I should have checked on Mrs. Harper when I first heard the crash. You taught us all a valuable lesson today." Layla smiled up at him, her eyes wise beyond her years. "It's okay, Mr. Thompson. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we were all here when it really counted." As the sun began to set on Maple Street, casting a warm glow over the scene, Layla couldn't help but feel that something big had shifted in her world. She had always believed in the power of kindness, but today she had seen firsthand how a small act of courage could ripple out and change an entire community. She didn't know what would happen next, how Mrs. Harper would recover, how the neighborhood would change, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never again underestimate the difference one person could make, no matter how small they might seem. As she walked home hand in hand with her mother, Layla looked back at the scene one last time. The overturned car, the gathered neighbors, the fading sound of sirens in the distance. It all seemed like a dream. But the warmth in her heart, the sense of purpose she felt, that was very real. "You know, Mama," Layla said as they reached their front porch, "I think I want to be a paramedic when I grow up. Or maybe a firefighter. Or maybe both." Tanya laughed, pulling her daughter close. "Baby girl, after what you did today, I believe you can be anything you set your mind to. Anything at all." As they stepped into their house, leaving the excitement of the day behind, Layla felt a sense of anticipation for what the future might hold. She had discovered something about herself today, something powerful and important, and she couldn't wait to see where this newfound strength would take her next. Little did Layla know, this was just the beginning of her journey. The bonds forged that day would continue to shape her life and the lives of everyone on Maple Street in ways she could never have imagined. For now, as the stars twinkled over Maple Street and the neighborhood settled into an uneasy but hopeful sleep, one thing was certain. Life would never be quite the same again. And it was all thanks to a little girl with a big heart who dared to care when others looked away. The day after the accident dawned bright and clear on Maple Street. The physical signs of yesterday's drama had been cleared away, but the emotional impact lingered in the air like a gentle fog. For Layla Johnson, the world seemed both familiar and strangely new as she woke up that Sunday morning. Layla lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous day in her mind. The crash, the fear in Mrs. Harper's voice, the way the neighbors had come together to help. It all swirled in her thoughts like a colorful whirlpool. She felt different somehow, as if she had grown years older overnight. A soft knock on her door broke through her reverie. "Layla, are you awake, baby girl?" Her mother's voice was gentle, carrying a note of concern. Mama, I'm up," Layla replied, sitting up in bed as Tanya entered the room. Tanya sat on the edge of the bed, reaching out to smooth Layla's wild curls. "How are you feeling this morning, sweetheart? That was quite a day yesterday." Layla leaned into her mother's touch, finding comfort in the familiar gesture. I'm okay, I think. Just thinking about everything. Is Mrs. Harper going to be all right? Tanya smiled, her eyes shining with pride. Thanks to you, baby. She's going to be just fine. I spoke with the hospital this morning. Mrs. Harper has a broken leg and some bruises, but she's going to recover fully. They said if she had been under that car much longer, things could have been a lot worse. Layla felt a wave of relief wash over her. She hadn't realized how worried she'd been until that moment. Can we visit her, Mama? I want to see her, to make sure she's really okay. Of course we can, Tanya replied. In fact, I thought we might go to the hospital this afternoon. How does that sound? Layla nodded enthusiastically, already feeling more energized. As she got out of bed and started to get ready for the day, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness at the thought of seeing Mrs. Harper again. The morning passed in a blur of breakfast and Sunday chores, but Layla found it hard to concentrate on anything. Her mind kept drifting back to the accident, to the fear, and then the triumph she had felt. When it was finally time to leave for the hospital, Layla was practically bouncing with anticipation. As they drove, Tanya glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror. You know, Layla, she said softly, I don't think I've told you just how proud I am of you. What you did yesterday, it was incredibly brave. You saved a life. Layla felt her cheeks grow warm at the praise. I was scared, Mama, she admitted. But I remembered what you always say about helping others, even when it's hard. I couldn't leave Mrs. Harper alone. Tanya nodded, her eyes misty. That's exactly it, baby. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are scared. And that's exactly what you did. As they pulled into the hospital parking lot, Layla felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. What if Mrs. Harper didn't want to see her? What if she was angry about the accident? But as soon as they entered Mrs. Harper's hospital room, all of Layla's fears melted away. The elderly woman's face lit up with a smile brighter than Layla had ever seen before. Layla, Mrs. Harper exclaimed, her voice weak but filled with warmth. Oh, my dear girl, come here. Let me look at you. Layla approached the bed hesitantly, taking in the sight of Mrs. Harper propped up on pillows, her leg in a cast. Despite the bandages and the hospital gown, Mrs. Harper looked more alive than Layla had ever seen her. How are you feeling, Mrs. Harper? Layla asked, her voice small. Mrs. Harper reached out and took Layla's hand in hers. Thanks to you, my dear. I'm feeling much better than I have any right to. You saved my life, Layla. I don't know how I can ever thank you enough. Layla felt tears prick at her eyes. I'm just glad you're okay, she said. I was so scared when I saw your car. Mrs. Harper squeezed Layla's hand. I was scared too, she admitted. But then I heard your voice, and I knew everything would be all right. You were so brave, so calm. You reminded me of my own daughter when she was your age. This was news to Layla. In all the time she had seen Mrs. Harper on her porch, she had never imagined her having a family of her own. You have a daughter? She asked, curiosity overcoming her shyness. A shadow passed over Mrs. Harper's face. She corrected gently. My Sarah, she passed away a few years ago. And then I lost my husband too. That's when I started to withdraw from everything. It just hurt too much to be around people, to be reminded of what I'd lost. Layla felt a lump form in her throat. She couldn't imagine losing her mama. No wonder Mrs. Harper had always seemed so sad. I'm so sorry, Layla whispered, squeezing Mrs. Harper's hand. Mrs. Harper smiled, a bittersweet expression. Thank you, dear. But yesterday, when you were there talking to me, keeping me calm, it was like having a piece of Sarah back. You reminded me that there's still good in the world, still reasons to connect with people. Tanya, who had been quietly watching the exchange, stepped forward. Mrs. Harper, we're all so relieved you're going to be okay. Is there anything we can do to help? Anything you need? Mrs. Harper looked thoughtful for a moment. Actually, there is something. Layla, would you be willing to visit me sometimes? Maybe we could bake those cookies we talked about once I'm back on my feet. Layla's face lit up with a brilliant smile. Really? You mean it? I'd love to. As they continued to chat, Layla felt a warm glow in her chest. She had come to the hospital worried about Mrs. Harper, but now she realized that maybe, just maybe, she had done more than save a life. Maybe she had helped heal a heart too. When it was time to leave, Layla gave Mrs. Harper a gentle hug, careful of her injuries. "I'll come back soon," she promised. "And I'll bring you some books to read while you're here, if you'd like." Mrs. Harper's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I'd like that very much, Layla. Thank you." As they left the hospital, Layla felt as if she was walking on air. The world seemed brighter somehow, full of possibilities she had never considered before. As they drove home, Layla's mind was whirling with ideas. She thought about Mrs. Harper, alone in that big house. She thought about the neighbors who had come together to help. And she thought about how one small act of kindness had changed everything. When they arrived back on Maple Street, Layla was surprised to see a group of neighbors gathered on their front lawn. Mr. Lee was there, along with the Thompsons, the Patels, and several others. As Tanya parked the car, Mr. Lee approached, a warm smile on his face. "Welcome back," he said. "We've been waiting for you. How's Mrs. Harper doing?" Layla climbed out of the car, her eyes wide with curiosity. "She's doing better," she replied. "The doctors say she'll recover fully." "But why is everyone here?" Mr. Thompson stepped forward, looking slightly embarrassed. "Well, Layla, we all got to talking after yesterday. About how we've been living side by side for years, but we barely know each other. About how it took a little girl to show us what it means to be a real community." Mrs. Patel nodded, adding, "We realized we want to change that. So we thought, why not start with a neighborhood picnic? A chance for all of us to get to know each other better." Layla's face lit up with excitement. "A picnic? Really? Can we, Mama?" she asked, turning to Tanya with pleading eyes. Tanya laughed, caught up in the infectious enthusiasm. "Of course we can, baby. I think it's a wonderful idea." As the neighbors began to set up tables and bring out food, Layla felt a sense of wonder. This was so different from the quiet, separate lives they had all been living just days ago. And it had all started with one small decision to help. The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter, conversation, and delicious food. Layla flitted from group to group, soaking in stories about the neighborhood's history, learning about her neighbors' lives and families. She heard about Mr. Lee's days as a race car mechanic, about Mrs. Patel's famous curry recipe, about Mr. Thompson's collection of rare stamps. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the gathering, Layla found herself sitting on the porch steps, taking it all in. Mr. Lee settled down beside her, his kind eyes twinkling. "Quite a change, isn't it?" he asked, nodding towards the laughing groups of neighbors. Layla nodded, a sense of awe in her voice. "It's amazing. I never knew we could all be friends like this." Mr. Lee chuckled. "Sometimes it takes a little shake-up to remind us of what's important. You know, Layla, what you did yesterday, it wasn't just about saving Mrs. Harper. You woke us all up, reminded us what it means to be neighbors, to be a community." Layla felt her cheeks grow warm at the praise. "I just did what anyone would do," she mumbled. Mr. Lee shook his head. "No, Layla, you did what everyone should do, but what too few of us actually do. You saw someone in need, and you acted. That's special. That's rare. And it's something you should be very proud of." As the evening wore on and neighbors began to say their goodbyes, promises were made to do this again soon. Phone numbers were exchanged, playdates were arranged, and plans were made to set up a neighborhood watch program. When the last guest had left and Layla was helping her mother clean up, she felt a deep sense of contentment. "Mama," she said, "do you think things will be different now? On Maple Street, I mean." Tanya paused in her tidying, looking thoughtfully at her daughter. "I think they already are different, baby girl. And it's all thanks to you." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to her word, Layla visited Mrs. Harper in the hospital regularly, bringing books, games, and stories about the neighborhood's transformation. With each visit, she saw Mrs. Harper become more animated, more engaged with the world around her. At home, the changes on Maple Street continued to unfold. The neighborhood picnic became a weekly event, rotating from house to house. People who had once been strangers now greeted each other warmly on the street, stopped to chat, offered help with yard work or childcare. Layla found herself at the center of much of this activity, her natural warmth and curiosity drawing people together. She organized a book club for the neighborhood kids, helped Mr. Lee set up a community garden in his backyard, and even convinced the Patels to teach a cooking class for anyone interested in learning to make authentic Indian cuisine. One sunny afternoon, about a month after the accident, Layla was helping her mother prepare for their turn to host the neighborhood picnic when there was a knock at the door. When Tanya opened it, they were surprised to see Mr. Thompson standing there, looking somewhat nervous. "Ms. Johnson, Layla," he said, nodding to each of them. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Tanya smiled warmly. "Not at all, Jack. What can we do for you?" Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "Well, I've been talking with some of the other neighbors, and we had an idea we wanted to run by you. It's about Mrs. Harper." Layla perked up at the mention of Mrs. Harper's name. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" No, nothing like that," Mr. Thompson reassured her quickly. "Actually, it's good news. Mrs. Harper is being released from the hospital tomorrow." "That's wonderful," Tanya exclaimed. "But why do you look so concerned?" Mr. Thompson sighed. "Well, you see, we got to thinking. Mrs. Harper lives alone in that big house. She'll need help while she recovers, maybe even after that. So we had an idea, but we wanted to check with you first, Layla, since you're the one who started all this." Layla's eyes widened with curiosity. "What kind of idea?" We thought maybe we could set up a schedule. Take turns checking in on Mrs. Harper, helping with meals, housework, that sort of thing. Make sure she's not alone while she recovers. And maybe even after that, if she'd like the company." Layla's face lit up with excitement. "That's a great idea, Mr. Thompson. Can I help too?" "Please." Mr. Thompson chuckled. "We were hoping you'd say that. In fact, we were wondering if you'd like to be in charge of the schedule. You seem to have a knack for organizing things." Layla looked to her mother, her eyes pleading. Tanya laughed, holding up her hands in surrender. "It's fine by me, baby girl. As long as you keep up with your schoolwork, I think it's a wonderful idea." And so, Operation Welcome Home was born. Under Layla's enthusiastic leadership, the neighbors of Maple Street came together to prepare for Mrs. Harper's return. They cleaned her house from top to bottom, stocked her fridge with home-cooked meals, and even planted a small flower garden in her front yard. On the day of Mrs. Harper's homecoming, Layla could barely contain her excitement. She stood on the front porch, bouncing on her toes, as Mr. Lee's truck pulled into the driveway. The entire neighborhood had turned out, lining the street with welcome signs and balloons. As Mr. Lee helped Mrs. Harper out of the car, Layla's heart swelled with emotion. The old woman looked so different from the lonely figure who used to sit on her porch. Her eyes were bright, her smile genuine as she took in the scene before her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Harper," Layla called out, rushing forward to give her a gentle hug. Mrs. Harper's eyes filled with tears as she embraced Layla. "Oh, my dear girl," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "What is all this?" "It's your welcome home party," Layla explained, beaming. "Everyone wanted to show you how happy we are that you're back." As Mrs. Harper made her way up the path, leaning on her cane, neighbors stepped forward to greet her, offer help, and welcome her back to the community. Layla watched with a sense of pride and joy, feeling the warmth of the moment wash over her. Mrs. Harper paused at the top of her porch steps, turning to face the gathered crowd. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she looked out at the faces of her neighbors. People she had barely spoken to for years, now here to welcome her home. I don't know what to say," Mrs. Harper began, her voice quavering slightly. "For so long, I shut myself away, convinced that I was better off alone. But you all, especially you, Layla," she said, reaching out to squeeze the young girl's hand, "have shown me how wrong I was. Thank you. Thank you all for this second chance." A chorus of cheers and applause erupted from the crowd. Layla felt her own eyes welling up with tears, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support. This was so much more than she had ever imagined when she first waved to Mrs. Harper from across the street. As the impromptu welcome home party moved into Mrs. Harper's backyard, Layla found herself at the center of attention. Neighbors kept coming up to her, praising her quick thinking during the accident and thanking her for bringing them all together. As the afternoon wore on, Layla noticed Mrs. Harper beginning to tire. Without a word, she slipped away from the party and into the kitchen, where she knew her mother had stored some of the meals they had prepared. She carefully heated up a bowl of soup, and carried it out to Mrs. Harper on a tray. "I thought you might be getting tired," Layla said, setting the tray on the table beside Mrs. Harper's chair. "Maybe some soup would help?" Mrs. Harper looked up at Layla with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. "You are something else, Layla Johnson," she said, reaching out to pat the girl's hand. "Thank you, dear. This is perfect." As Mrs. Harper ate, Layla sat beside her, keeping her company and quietly shooing away well-meaning neighbors who might overwhelm the recovering woman. It was a small gesture, but one that didn't go unnoticed by the adults watching. "That girl's got a good head on her shoulders," Mr. Thompson murmured to Tanya. "You must be very proud." Tanya nodded, her eyes misting over as she watched her daughter. "I am," she said softly. "But I think we all have reason to be proud today. Look at what we've accomplished together." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Mrs. Harper's lawn, the party began to wind down. Neighbors said their goodbyes, each promising to check in on Mrs. Harper according to the schedule Layla had meticulously prepared. Before leaving, Layla knelt beside Mrs. Harper's chair. "I'll be back tomorrow after school," she promised. "We can start reading that new book I brought you if you'd like." Mrs. Harper smiled, reaching out to cup Layla's cheek. "I'd like that very much, dear. You've brought so much light into my life. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Layla shook her head, her eyes shining. "You don't have to repay me, Mrs. Harper. That's not what friends do. We just take care of each other." As Layla walked home with her mother, hand in hand in the gathering twilight, she felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she'd experienced before. She had set out to help one person and ended up changing an entire neighborhood. The weeks that followed brought many changes to Maple Street. The Neighborhood Watch program that had been discussed at the first picnic became a reality, with residents taking turns patrolling the street in the evenings. Mr. Lee's community garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables for anyone who wanted them. The Patel's cooking classes became a monthly event, with neighbors gathering to learn new recipes and share meals together. And at the center of it all was Layla, her boundless energy and compassion continuing to inspire those around her. She kept her promise to visit Mrs. Harper regularly, reading to her, helping with small chores, and simply providing companionship. As Mrs. Harper's leg healed and she became more mobile, Layla encouraged her to join in community events, slowly helping her reconnect with the world she had shut out for so long. One crisp autumn afternoon, about 3 months after the accident, Layla arrived at Mrs. Harper's house for her usual visit to find the older woman sitting on her front porch, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Harper?" Layla asked, settling into the chair beside her. Mrs. Harper smiled, reaching out to take Layla's hand. "Everything is wonderful, dear. I was just thinking about how much has changed since that day you found me under my car. You know, I never told you this, but I had been thinking of selling this house before the accident." Layla's eyes widened in surprise. "Selling? But why?" Mrs. Harper sighed, her gaze drifting out to the street where children played and neighbors chatted. "It just felt too big, too empty after I lost my husband and Sarah. But now," she trailed off, squeezing Layla's hand. "Now I can't imagine leaving. This isn't just a house anymore. It's part of a community, a family." Layla beamed, her heart swelling with joy. "I'm so glad you're staying, Mrs. Harper. It wouldn't be the same without you." Mrs. Harper nodded, then turned to face Layla fully. "I've been thinking, dear. You've done so much for me, for this whole neighborhood. I want to do something in return, something to make sure that the spirit of kindness you've awakened here lives on." Layla tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" "Well," Mrs. Harper said, a twinkle in her eye, "I've been talking with your mother and some of the other neighbors. We think it's time Maple Street had a proper community center, a place where people can gather, where we can hold classes and events, where anyone who needs help can find it." Layla's eyes widened with excitement. "A community center? That sounds amazing. But where will we put it?" Mrs. Harper chuckled. "That's the thing, dear. I've decided to donate my house. It's too big for just me, but it's perfect for a community center. We can convert the downstairs into meeting rooms and classrooms, and I'll keep an apartment upstairs for myself." Layla was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Mrs. Harper's gesture. But it's your home," she finally managed to say. Mrs. Harper shook her head, her eyes shining with determination. No, Layla. Thanks to you, my home is this entire street now. This is just a way of making it official. The news of Mrs. Harper's decision spread quickly through the neighborhood, igniting a new wave of excitement and community spirit. Neighbors volunteered their time and skills to help with the renovation, turning the once lonely house into a vibrant hub of activity. Mr. Lee oversaw the structural changes, ensuring that the house was accessible for everyone. The Patels helped design a community kitchen where cooking classes could be held. Mr. Thompson, a retired teacher, set up a small library and tutoring center in what used to be the formal dining room. And Layla, with her seemingly endless enthusiasm, was everywhere at once, helping to paint walls, organizing donations of furniture and books, and coming up with ideas for programs they could offer. As winter settled over Maple Street, the community center neared completion. The night before the grand opening, Layla stood with her mother and Mrs. Harper in what used to be the living room, now transformed into a cozy meeting space. I can hardly believe it, Tanya said, shaking her head in wonder. 6 months ago, we barely knew our neighbors. Now look at what we've accomplished together. Mrs. Harper nodded, leaning on her cane as she surveyed the room. And it all started with one little girl who wasn't afraid to wave hello, she said, smiling down at Layla. The next day, as Layla stood beside Mrs. Harper to cut the ribbon officially opening the Maple Street Community Center, she felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had ever experienced. The street was lined with people, not just from their neighborhood, but from all over town. The local news had even sent a reporter to cover the story. As Mrs. Harper addressed the crowd, telling the story of how a young girl's kindness had transformed a neighborhood, Layla felt a tugging on her sleeve. She looked down to see a little boy, no more than 5 or 6, looking up at her with wide eyes. "Are you the girl who saved the old lady?" he asked in a stage whisper. Layla knelt down to his level, smiling gently. "I just did what anyone would do," she said. "I saw someone who needed help, and I helped." The little boy nodded solemnly. "I want to be like you when I grow up," he declared. Layla felt a warmth spread through her chest. "You don't have to wait until you grow up," she told him. "You can start helping people right now. It can be something small like smiling at someone who looks sad or helping a friend with their homework. Every little bit of kindness makes the world a better place." As the little boy scampered off, presumably to share this wisdom with his friends, Layla stood up to find Mrs. Harper watching her with a knowing smile. As the ribbon was cut and people began to stream into the new community center, Layla found herself surrounded by her neighbors. People who had once been strangers, but were now as close as family. Mr. Lee ruffled her hair as he passed, carrying a box of tools for his first home repair class. The Patels waved from the kitchen, where they were setting up for a cooking demonstration. Mr. Thompson called out a greeting as he arranged books on the new library shelves. As the day wore on and the excitement of the opening began to die down, Layla found a quiet moment to slip away. She made her way to the back porch of the community center, still Mrs. Harper's porch in her mind, and sat down on the steps, looking out at the neighborhood she had helped to transform. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over Maple Street. In the distance, she could hear the laughter of children playing, the murmur of adults in conversation. A sense of peace settled over her, a feeling that all was right with the world. "Room for one more?" a familiar voice asked. Layla looked up to see her mother standing in the doorway. She nodded, scooting over to make room. Tanya settled beside her daughter, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. For a long moment, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky change colors as the sun dipped below the horizon. "You know, Layla," Tanya said finally, "I've been thinking about something Mr. Lee said to me today. He said that sometimes it takes a child to remind adults of what's truly important in life. I think he's right." Layla leaned into her mother's embrace. "What do you mean, Mama?" Tanya smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of Layla's head. "I mean that in all the hustle and bustle of growing up, sometimes we forget the simple truths we knew as children. That kindness matters, that helping others is its own reward, that a community is only as strong as the bonds between its members." "Mama," Layla said, her voice filled with quiet determination, "I want to keep doing this. Not just here on Maple Street, but everywhere. I want to help people see that we're all connected, that we all have the power to make things better. Tanya hugged her daughter close. I have no doubt that you will, baby girl. You've got a big heart and a bright spirit. Just remember, you don't have to change the whole world all at once. Sometimes, the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. Layla nodded, a sense of purpose filling her young heart. As they sat there on the porch steps, watching the night settle over their transformed neighborhood, she made a silent promise to herself. She would carry this lesson with her always, this understanding of the power of compassion and community. And wherever life took her, she would strive to be that spark of kindness, that reminder of our shared humanity. And as long as she held on to that knowledge, as long as she kept that flame of kindness burning in her heart, there was no limit to the good she could do in the world. In a world where it's easy to overlook the small things, Layla's actions remind us that even the most unexpected heroes can rise in moments of crisis. So, the next time you see a situation unfolding, will you be the one to step up, just like Layla? Before you go, let us know your thoughts on this heartwarming story in the comments below. If this tale of bravery inspired you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on more stories like this one. Until next time, remember, sometimes the smallest voices can make the biggest difference.